Happy Tuesday. It means it's time for this week's video. Get ready. Okay, by now, a lot of you know that Jim Richards, who is a former colleague of Mike Williams, wrote an article against Mike and the gospel that we preach. And he published it on his website. We have republished that on gospelrevolution.com. It's a very long article. I printed it out, and it's 20 pages on 8.5 by 11, not little book-sized pages. And he makes several points throughout the 20 pages why he's against the gospel that we preach. So one thing that he spends a little time on and repeats basically in the latter half of his article is the gospel of the kingdom. He says, according to Jesus, grace is not the message that will be preached before the end comes. The message that will be preached to prepare the world for the end times is the gospel of the kingdom. And so then he cites Matthew 24:14, which says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Okay. Now Jesus preached the gospel of the kingdom. He said the kingdom is nigh, the kingdom is at hand, the kingdom is in your midst. He preached the gospel, the good news that the kingdom is here. It's at hand. It's nigh. He preached the good news that it's here. It's nigh. It's at hand. That was 2,000 years ago. But he's like, it's here. It's nigh. It's in your midst. So now Jim knows this. So I'm starting to wonder how truthful Jim even feels he was in writing this. The other thing is the end that Jesus specifically was speaking of was the end of the old covenant, because for the new covenant to start, the old covenant had to end, because Jim mentions we are in a new covenant. So the old covenant had to end, and Jim is also trying to defend the law, and he actually does himself know that the law has been abolished, but he defends preaching the law. And Paul said the law, when the law is preached, it is a ministry of nothing but condemnation. You can't preach the law and exhort godliness or righteousness in it, because the law never made a man righteous. So he's talking about how the kingdom will be preached in all the world before the end. Well, the end would be the end of the old covenant, and that ended through the work of the cross. That was the end. The world here is a word in the original Greek that meant specifically the Roman Empire. Now, this is, again, it reminds me, I actually did a video on Jesus did preach a gospel called, and his gospel was about the kingdom of heaven and it being here. But when it comes to the gospel being preached to the world, meaning the Roman Empire, even Paul confirmed it was preached. It did go, their word did go out into all the world, into the oikomene, which is the word used here in Matthew as well. And it did go out. And now that I think of it, Luke or John, one of the two, I'm pretty sure it was one of those, in one of their books that they wrote, also said that their message went out into all the world. Well, Jesus' message was the gospel of the kingdom, and it did come right before the end. That good news did come right before the end. It came right before the end of the old covenant. And then Paul, he said that the gospel went out into all the world. And so Jesus was preaching the gospel of the kingdom is at hand, it's here, it's in your midst. Paul's gospel is saying that the gospel came, that the kingdom came. Jesus said it was here, it's nigh, and Paul is saying it came. Just a little bit of past tense because it was after it came. But the gospel of the kingdom was preached before the end, and it was preached 2,000 years ago. It's revolutionary, I know. Have a revolutionary week.